How do we determine when sex is actually sexual assault? And what role does consent and educating individuals about consent play in decreasing incidents of rape? I've got those answers and more for you here on Alien Observations. To address the opening questions, I would first like to share with you a hypothetical situation where there is enough information to have a legitimate discourse around it. Second, discuss the importance of consent education and the hypocritical platform taken by feminists. And finally, I will illustrate why teaching a woman to protect herself is a good thing, while the concept of teach men not to rape is absolutely absurd. Drawing from my personal experiences and the personal experiences of my friends, both men and women in college, I have crafted this hypothetical. For ease of understanding, it will be presented in the first person. When I was in college, my friends and I went to and hosted many parties. Some one or two of us would end up the evening sharing a woman's company, sometimes more, sometimes none at all. Now, I'm the type of person that, if a woman was describing me to her friends, she would say, "He has a great personality." And that's 100% accurate. I am a nice guy, but empirically, physically unattractive. Now, the best thing about parties is that the longer the party goes, the more attractive a nice guy gets. As the evening grinds on and the beer goggles are dialed in, physical attractiveness becomes less and less important, and the personality, the ability to laugh and joke, be polite and courteous, and offer witty quips and remarks, becomes more important. Now, I would never rape a girl. No means no. I understand that. And I would never intentionally get a woman so drunk that she was incapable of making an informed decision. I have never simply assumed consent. But I have slept with a girl who regretted it the next day. Sure, we had a great time, sloppily making out, and then we both laughed as she clumsily tried to remove her shirt and got it tangled in her ponytail. And when I tried to take my pants off without first undoing my belt, I ended up falling face first onto the bed like a calf at a rodeo who'd just been hogtied. We laughed and giggled and tried not to make too much noise because only just then we realized her roommate was about 10 feet away and doing her damnedest to pretend that she was asleep. After a night of awkward lovemaking on a bed barely wide enough to be called a twin, we fell asleep in each other's arms. Then came the next morning. A pounding head, a stomach full of bile fighting to get out, and for her, a glimpse of the mistake she made last night without her beer goggles on. She was very polite, but it was clear that she regretted her decision and the decision-making process, or lack thereof, from last night. We encountered each other several times on campus over the next few weeks, and it was quite obvious that every time she saw me, the shame and embarrassment of that morning, waking up next to me, flooded her memory. She, however, was a decent human being, who politely returned my greetings as we passed each other on campus. A month later, as I passed by, a group of her friends began teasing her about her terribly low standards. She rounded on them and snapped, "I was drunk, okay? It's not like I would have had sex with him under any other circumstance." And then her friends slowly went silent and stared at me. What had been an embarrassing night of consensual sex had just become a heinous rape. Now, like I said, parts of that are drawn from my personal experiences, some from others' personal experiences. But it isn't inconceivable that a scenario like that could play out for a single individual. In the culture of listen and believe, this hypothetical situation could easily be mislabeled as rape. All the woman has to do is deny her own autonomy. Deny her claim that she is an adult and that she can make her own choices. All she has to do is say, I was too drunk to consent, and it becomes rape. And even if she had spent the entire night screaming in pleasure, oh yes, yes, keep doing that, she has become a victim of rape because she is not in control of her thoughts and has no power to make her own decisions. Or at least, that's what the feminists would have you believe. This brings me to my second point, why teaching consent is so important. When feminists argue that we need to teach men what consent means so that they don't become sexual assailants, I can't help but be amazed at the hypocrisy. This statement is as counterintuitive to the concept of the equality of genders as anything I could dream up in my most patriarchal nightmares. This statement puts all of the responsibility on men, which means that the men are the only actors in the equation which have any autonomy or any power to control the situation. We need to teach men and women what consent means. It takes two people to have sex, unless you're particularly advanced, and then you may have 3 or 4 people, maybe even a few inanimate objects thrown in there. But women also need consent from men. But feminists will never mention this. Women also need to know that if they wish to withdraw consent, they need to make that fact known during the event and not a day or a week or a month afterwards. But feminists will never mention this. Women have an equal amount of responsibility as men when it comes to communicating about consent, because women have an equal amount of rights as men. And you will only hear feminists mention the second half of that statement. If women don't bear the same responsibilities as men, that can only be because they don't have the same rights as men. Why do you insist on saying that men and women should have equal rights, but only men should bear the responsibilities? We don't teach giant rubber dildos about consent because they're inanimate fucking objects. They have no autonomy. They have no power or self-actualization or the ability to make decisions for themselves because they're rubber fucking dildos. So feminists, why do you treat women the same way? This brings me to my final point. Teaching women and men to protect themselves and take precautions is as important as teaching them about consent. If you are going out to a party, regardless of your gender, you should take precautions and you should be educated about protecting yourself. When you leave your house, you should lock the door. If you come home and find that your house has been burglarized, the first thing a police officer will ask you is, did you lock the front door? If you say to him, no, he will rightly demand to know, why the fuck not? It isn't the homeowner's fault that their property was stolen, but if they had taken precautions, maybe the incident would never have taken place at all. Personally, my body is much more important to me than my home. I can always get new stuff. I can't replace my despoiled body. Telling a woman what she should or should not wear is not teaching her how to protect herself. The people who say, "Well, look at how she's dressed. She was asking for it." Those are ignorant assholes. And yet feminists, with their counterproductive commentary, poison the well. Feminists will point to ignorance and say, "See? This is why we shouldn't teach women to take precautions." That is a disingenuous argument, and you know it. But feminists still do it because it fits their patriarchy narrative. Protecting yourself means not drinking to the point where you are no longer capable of making sound decisions for yourself. It means that if you are going to go wild and crazy, you should be with a friend or a group of friends who can help you out if you get yourself in trouble. It means using a taxi and not driving. It means wearing a coat if you plan to be outside in the snow. It means using your common sense before going out so that you can make appropriate decisions later on. And we need to be teaching this to both men and women, because both men and women can benefit from this. They shouldn't have to discover all of this for themselves on some trial and error basis, because that is how people get hurt. And while we're here, let's put this "teach men not to rape" bullshit to bed once and for all. That statement implies one of two situations. The first, men don't know that raping someone is bad. They turn up in the courtroom and look blankly at the judge and announce, "What do you mean I shouldn't rape people? That's against the law now or something?" Men know rape is wrong, and the ones who still choose to do it won't be dissuaded by anyone trying to teach them not to rape. The second situation is that when you say teach men not to rape, what you mean is teach men how to correctly obtain and retain consent throughout sexual intercourse. Now, feminists may say, "Of course that's what we mean. It's just semantics." But it isn't fucking semantics. Teach men not to rape has all sorts of negative connotations laced throughout it. Teach men about proper consent isn't charged with hidden meaning and insidious undertones. And as we discussed earlier, even the statement, "teach men about consent," is still a radically different message than the ones feminists preach. Education is important, but it is important for both sexes. Equal rights, equal responsibilities. You can't have special privileges and still be equal. Either stop calling yourselves feminists or start acting like one. You wonder why the anti-feminist community is growing so rapidly. It's not because we disagree that men and women should be equal. It's because we believe feminism is at best hypocritical and at worst the underhanded attempt of a group of women to subjugate all men and any women who don't join their cult. It's time to put up or shut up, feminists. Are you for equality or are you for special treatment? Thank you all for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic, so please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great night.